What if I told you that every single person on this planet, regardless of their religion, culture, or beliefs, is searching for the same thing? And what if that thing has been right in front of us all along, hiding in plain sight? Today, we're going to tackle the biggest question humanity has ever asked. Who is God? Look, I know what you're thinking. Another video about God, another sermon, another attempt to convert you to some belief system. But hold on, because this isn't that kind of video. We're not here to preach. We're here to think, to question, to explore one of the most fundamental mysteries of human existence. Whether you're religious, spiritual, an atheist, or somewhere in between, this question affects you. It shapes how you see the world, how you find meaning, and how you understand your place in this vast universe. So let's start with something simple. When you hear the word God, what comes to mind? For many people, it's an old man with a white beard sitting on a cloud, right? Maybe it's a strict judge keeping track of your sins. Or perhaps it's a loving father figure watching over you. But here's the thing. These images, these concepts, they're all human constructs. They're our attempts to make sense of something that might be fundamentally beyond our comprehension. And that's exactly where this journey gets interesting. Think about it this way. Imagine you're an ant trying to understand what a human is. You can see our foot when it comes down near your anthill. You can observe our shadow. You might even notice patterns in our behavior. But can you, as an ant, truly comprehend the full complexity of human consciousness, our emotions, our thoughts, our civilization? Probably not. Now, what if the gap between humans and God is infinitely larger than the gap between ants and humans? What if we're trying to understand something so vast, so complex, so fundamentally different from anything in our experience that all our descriptions fall short? But that doesn't mean we should stop trying, because humans are curious creatures. We've always asked the big questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? And at the center of all these questions sits this concept of God, the ultimate answer, the prime mover, the first cause, the infinite being. But different cultures and religions have come up with wildly different answers to this question, haven't they? Let's take a quick tour around the world. In Christianity, God is often described as a trinity, three persons in one being, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's a personal God who loves, who judges, who intervenes in human affairs. This God created the universe in 6 days and rested on the seventh. This God sent his Son to die for humanity's sins. This is a God you can have a relationship with, a God you can pray to, a God who listens. Now travel east to Hinduism, and suddenly the picture becomes much more complex. Here, God isn't just one being. There's Brahman, the ultimate reality, the cosmic consciousness that pervades everything. But Brahman manifests in countless forms: Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer, Brahma the creator, and thousands of other deities. Each one represents a different aspect of the divine. And here's where it gets really interesting. In some Hindu philosophies, you are God, not in an egotistical sense, but in the understanding that your true self, your Atman, is actually identical to Brahman. You're not separate from the divine, you're part of it. You are it. Move a bit further east to Buddhism, and you'll find something surprising. Many forms of Buddhism don't really focus on God at all. The Buddha himself refused to answer questions about the existence of a creator deity. Why? Because he thought such questions were distractions from the real work, ending suffering. In Buddhism, the focus is on enlightenment, on understanding the nature of reality, on breaking free from the cycle of rebirth. God, as a concept, isn't necessary for this path. And that raises an interesting question. Can you have spirituality without God? In Islam, God is Allah, the one and only, indivisible, absolute. Islam emphasizes the complete transcendence of God. Allah is not like anything in creation. You can't represent God in images or statues. That would be limiting the unlimited. God is merciful and compassionate, but also just and all-powerful. Every moment of your life is known to God. Your fate is written, yet you still have free will to choose your path. It's a beautiful paradox that Muslims have contemplated for centuries. Then you have indigenous religions around the world, where God might be present in everything. In the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the animals. God isn't separate from nature. God is nature. The divine is immanent, present in every rock and every raindrop. When you walk through a forest, you're walking through God. When you swim in the ocean, you're swimming in God. And what about atheism? Some people would say atheists have no concept of God, but that's not quite right, is it? Atheists have thought deeply about God. They've examined the evidence, the arguments, the philosophical proofs, and they've concluded that God probably doesn't exist. Or at least, that there's no good reason to believe in God. For atheists, the universe doesn't need a creator. It can exist on its own terms. Morality doesn't need a divine lawgiver. It can emerge from human evolution and social cooperation, meaning doesn't need to be handed down from above. It can be created by each individual through their choices and actions. So we've got all these different concepts of God, all these different perspectives. They can't all be right, can they? Or can they? What if they're all glimpses of the same truth, seen from different angles? Like blind men touching different parts of an elephant. One feels the trunk and says it's like a snake, another feels the leg and says it's like a tree, and another feels the ear and says it's like a fan. They're all describing the same elephant, but their limited perspective makes them think they're describing completely different things. Or maybe, just maybe, the very question of who is God is flawed from the beginning. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Instead of who is God, maybe we should be asking what the nature of ultimate reality is? Or how should we live in relation to the mystery at the heart of existence? Because the moment we say who, we're anthropomorphizing. We're making God into a person, a being with thoughts and intentions and personality. But what if God is more like the laws of physics, or the ground of being itself? What if God is the reason there's something rather than nothing? Let's look at some of the traditional arguments for God's existence. You've probably heard some of these before. There's the cosmological argument, which goes something like this. Everything that exists has a cause. The universe exists. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And that cause, that first cause, that uncaused cause, that's God. It's elegant, isn't it? But it raises an obvious question. If everything has a cause, what caused God? And if God doesn't need a cause, why can't the universe itself be the thing that doesn't need a cause? Then there's the teleological argument, also called the argument from design. When you look at the complexity of the universe, the fine-tuning of physical constants, the intricacy of living organisms, and the beauty of mathematical laws that govern reality, it seems designed. A watch implies a watchmaker. A universe implies a universe maker. This argument has been around for thousands of years, and it still resonates with many people. But evolution by natural selection showed us that apparent design can emerge from unguided processes. Complexity can arise without a designer. And as for the fine-tuning of the universe, well, maybe there are countless universes with different physical constants, and we just happen to be in one that can support life. We wouldn't be here to ask the question if we weren't. There's also the ontological argument, which is probably the strangest of all. It basically says that God is defined as the greatest conceivable being. A being that exists is greater than a being that doesn't exist. Therefore, God must exist, because if God didn't exist, we could conceive of a greater being that does exist, which would contradict the definition. It's a purely logical argument, and it's been debated for nearly 1,000 years. Some philosophers find it brilliant. Others think it's a linguistic trick, playing games with the word existence. And we can't forget the moral argument. This one says that objective moral values exist, things that are truly right or wrong, not just matters of opinion or cultural preference. But if objective moral values exist, they need a foundation. And that foundation is God. Without God, morality would just be subjective preference. With God, there's a standard, a lawgiver, a source of moral truth. But again, the counterargument is that morality can be grounded in human well-being, in empathy, in the social contracts we create. We don't need a divine commander to tell us that causing unnecessary suffering is wrong. We can figure that out ourselves. Here's where things get really interesting, though. In the 20th century, we made some discoveries that fundamentally changed our understanding of reality. Quantum mechanics showed us that at the deepest level, reality is strange, weirder than we ever imagined. Particles can be in multiple states at once. They can be connected across vast distances instantaneously. The act of observation affects what we observe. Reality isn't a solid, fixed thing. It's more like a probability wave, collapsing into actuality when measured. Some physicists have suggested that consciousness plays a fundamental role in creating reality. If that's true, what does it say about the relationship between mind and matter, between consciousness and God? Then there's the simulation hypothesis. What if our entire universe is actually a computer simulation running in some higher reality? If that's the case, then the programmer of the simulation would effectively be God from our perspective. They created our universe, they set the rules, and they could intervene if they wanted to. It sounds like science fiction, but some serious philosophers and scientists take this idea seriously. And here's the kicker: we might never be able to prove or disprove it. Let's bring this back down to earth for a moment. Because, regardless of all these philosophical arguments and scientific theories, for most people, the question of God is deeply personal. It's not about logical proofs or cosmological constants. It's about meaning. It's about purpose. It's about whether we're alone in this vast universe or whether there's something greater than ourselves. When someone loses a loved one, they don't usually find comfort in the ontological argument. They find comfort in the belief that death isn't the end, that there's something more, that they'll see their loved one again. When someone faces a difficult decision, they don't typically calculate the probability of a divine being existing. They pray. They ask for guidance. They try to connect with something beyond themselves. When someone experiences a moment of transcendence, whether through meditation, prayer, art, nature, or even psychedelics, they're not thinking about logical proofs. They're feeling something profound, something that seems to point beyond the ordinary world. And this is where we need to be honest about the limits of reason. Reason is a powerful tool. It's helped us understand the world, build civilization, cure diseases, and explore space. But can reason alone answer the question of God? Can logic tell you what it feels like to love someone? Can science measure the beauty of a sunset? Can philosophy capture the peace of deep meditation? Some things might be beyond the reach of rational analysis. Some truths might be experiential rather than intellectual. Many mystics throughout history have said that God cannot be known through thinking, only through direct experience. You can't think your way to God. You have to experience God. And what they describe when they talk about this experience is remarkably consistent across different cultures and religions. A sense of unity, of oneness with everything. A feeling of unconditional love. A perception that all separation is an illusion. A deep peace that transcends understanding. They say that when you have this experience, you don't need proof that God exists. It becomes self-evident. It's like asking someone to prove that they're conscious. They just know. It's the most certain knowledge they have. But here's the problem. Not everyone has these mystical experiences. And even among those who do, the interpretations vary wildly. A Christian mystic might interpret the experience as union with Christ. A Hindu mystic might interpret it as realizing their identity with Brahman. A Buddhist might interpret it as glimpsing the true nature of emptiness. An atheist might interpret it as an interesting neurological phenomenon, the brain's default mode network shutting down, the breakdown of the boundary between self and world. Same experience, different interpretations. So how do we know which interpretation is correct? Or are they all equally valid? Or equally mistaken? Let's consider another angle. Maybe the question isn't whether God exists, but what we mean by the word God. Because that word carries so much baggage, doesn't it? Centuries of theology, countless wars fought in God's name, rules and regulations supposedly handed down from on high, cultural conditioning from childhood, and emotional associations, both positive and negative. Maybe we need to strip all that away and start fresh. What if we define God simply as the totality of existence? Everything, that is, the universe itself. Would that change how we think about the question? Some people call this pantheism, the belief that God and the universe are identical. Einstein said he believed in Spinoza's God, the God who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists, not a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings. Or what if we define God as the mystery itself, the unknowable reality that underlies everything we can know, the thing beyond all concepts and categories? You can't describe it because any description would limit it. You can't name it because any name would be inadequate. The ancient Chinese Tao Te Ching says, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." Maybe God is like that. The moment you think you've grasped it, you've lost it. It's always beyond reach, always transcendent, always more than anything you can say about it. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if God is evil, or at least not entirely good? We tend to assume that God must be perfectly good, all-loving, and benevolent. But why? If God created everything, didn't God also create suffering, disease, natural disasters, and death? Didn't God create a world where animals must kill other animals to survive? Where do children get cancer? Where genocides happen? The problem of evil has troubled theologians for thousands of years. If God is all-powerful and all-good, why is there evil? If God can prevent evil but doesn't, then God isn't all-good. If God wants to prevent evil but can't, then God isn't all-powerful. If God neither can nor wants to prevent evil, then why call this being God? Various answers have been proposed. Free will. We need the freedom to choose evil for good choices to be meaningful. Soul-making. Suffering builds character and brings us closer to God. Mystery. We simply can't understand God's reasons with our limited minds. But none of these answers fully satisfy, do they? A parent who lets their child suffer to build character would be considered abusive. Free will doesn't explain natural disasters that kill thousands of people. And appealing to mystery is essentially giving up on finding an answer. Some religious traditions have embraced a different view. In Hinduism, the goddess Kali is both creator and destroyer. In some forms of Gnosticism, the creator of the material world is actually evil, and the true God is beyond this flawed creation. Dualistic religions like Zoroastrianism propose two gods, one good and one evil, locked in eternal struggle. Maybe reality is more complex than simple good versus evil. Maybe God encompasses both light and darkness, order and chaos, creation and destruction. Maybe God is beyond our moral categories altogether. Or, and this is a radical thought, what if there is no God? What if the universe just is? No creator, no purpose, no ultimate meaning beyond what we create ourselves. For some people, this thought is terrifying. It means we're alone, floating on a tiny rock in an indifferent universe, our lives ultimately meaningless in the cosmic scheme of things. When we die, we simply cease to exist. No afterlife, no reunion with loved ones, no ultimate justice where wrongs are made right. It's a cold, hard truth that many people find difficult to accept, but others find this thought liberating. If there's no cosmic plan, then we're truly free. Free to create our own meaning, to define our own values, to forge our own path. We're not slaves to some divine will. We're not being tested for some future reward or punishment. We can focus on this life, this world, these relationships, right here, right now. We can appreciate the beauty and wonder of existence without needing it to serve some higher purpose. As the philosopher Camus said, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Even in an absurd universe without ultimate meaning, we can choose to embrace life, to rebel against meaninglessness by creating meaning. But let's be honest, most people oscillate between faith and doubt. Even the most devout believers have moments where they question, where they wonder if they've been fooling themselves. And even the most committed atheists sometimes feel a sense of something more, a touch of the transcendent, a whisper of the divine. We're complex creatures, capable of holding contradictory thoughts and feelings simultaneously. Maybe that's okay. Maybe certainty isn't the goal. Maybe the question itself is more important than any answer we could come up with. Think about how the concept of God has evolved throughout human history. Our earliest ancestors probably saw gods in natural phenomena, thunder gods, sun gods, and fertility goddesses. As civilizations became more complex, so did their concepts of deity. Gods took on moral characteristics, became concerned with justice, and developed complex mythologies. Monotheism emerged, with one god instead of many. Then that one god became increasingly abstract, less anthropomorphic, more philosophical. In modern times, some people have moved beyond personal God concepts altogether, embracing panentheism, the idea that God contains the universe but is also more than the universe. Or process theology, the idea that God is not unchanging but evolves along with creation. Where is this evolution heading? Will future generations think our concepts of God are as primitive as we think ancient polytheism is? Will there be a time when the question of God becomes obsolete, replaced by something we can't even imagine yet? Or will humans always grapple with this question, always seek connection with the transcendent, always wonder about the ultimate nature of reality? Here's something to consider. Every culture in human history has had some concept of the divine. Every society has developed religious practices. This universal human tendency suggests that religion might be hardwired into us somehow. Maybe it's an evolutionary adaptation. Groups with shared religious beliefs cooperate better and outcompete groups without them. Maybe it's a byproduct of other cognitive abilities, like our tendency to see patterns and agency everywhere. Or maybe, just maybe, this universal religious impulse exists because there really is something to be religious about. Because God, in some form, actually exists, and humans have an innate capacity to sense this reality. But we also know that the human brain is incredibly good at fooling itself. We see faces in clouds. We find meaning in random patterns. We believe stories that comfort us, even when evidence contradicts them. We're susceptible to cognitive biases, confirmation bias, groupthink, and wishful thinking. So how do we separate genuine spiritual insight from self-deception? How do we distinguish between a real encounter with the divine and a neurological event in the brain? Maybe we can't. Maybe there's no objective way to tell the difference. And maybe that's okay. Let's talk about something practical. How does your belief or non-belief in God affect how you live your life? This is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? If you believe in a God who judges your actions, who rewards good and punishes evil, that probably influences your behavior. You might be more likely to help others, more likely to resist temptation, and more motivated to follow moral rules. But you might also live in fear of punishment or act morally for the wrong reasons, seeking reward rather than doing good for its own sake. If you don't believe in God, do you have less reason to be moral? Some religious people think so, but atheists would strongly disagree. They'd say that morality based on empathy and reason is actually superior to morality based on obedience to authority. They'd point out that you can be good without God, and that many terrible things have been done in God's name. Secular humanism offers a framework for living ethically without religious belief. But belief in God can provide something hard to find elsewhere, a sense of ultimate purpose, of cosmic significance. If you're part of God's plan, then your life matters, not just to you or your loved ones, but in an absolute sense. Your actions have eternal consequences. You're connected to something infinitely greater than yourself. For many people, this is deeply meaningful and motivating. It helps them endure suffering, maintain hope in dark times, and strive to be better than they are. On the other hand, not believing in God can free you from certain burdens. You don't have to reconcile suffering with divine benevolence. You don't have to worry about blasphemy or heresy. You don't have to follow rules that may be arbitrary or harmful. You can think for yourself, question everything, and change your mind when presented with new evidence. You can embrace uncertainty without feeling like you're failing some test of faith. What about prayer? Billions of people pray every day. They talk to God, ask for help, express gratitude, confess sins, and seek guidance. But does prayer work? Studies on intercessory prayer have shown mixed results at best. When people don't know they're being prayed for, prayer doesn't seem to have measurable effects. But when people know they're praying or being prayed for, they often report feeling better, more hopeful, more peaceful. Is that just a placebo effect? Or is there something real happening, even if it's not what we expected? Maybe prayer works, not by changing external circumstances, but by changing the person who prays. Maybe it's a form of meditation, a way of clarifying your thoughts and intentions. Maybe it helps you process emotions, gain perspective, tap into inner resources you didn't know you had. Or maybe, just maybe, prayer does connect you with something beyond yourself, even if that connection works differently than we imagine. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine you could know, with absolute certainty, whether God exists or not. A perfect, infallible proof, one way or the other. Would you want to know? Some people would say yes immediately. Of course, they'd want to know. It's the most important question there is. But think about it more carefully. If the answer is that God doesn't exist, would that knowledge destroy your sense of meaning and purpose? Would life lose its savor? Would you fall into despair? And if the answer is that God does exist, but it's a God you don't like, a God whose rules you disagree with, a God who seems unjust or cruel, would you be able to accept that? Would you worship this God anyway? Or would you rebel? Maybe not knowing is part of the human condition. Maybe faith requires uncertainty. If God's existence were provable, there'd be no room for faith, only knowledge. And knowledge doesn't require the same kind of commitment that faith does. Anyone can acknowledge a proven fact, but choosing to believe without proof, or despite uncertainty, that's a different kind of thing. It's a leap, a risk, a commitment of the whole self. For some people, that leap is beautiful and meaningful. For others, it's foolish and unnecessary. Think about moments in your own life when you felt connected to something greater than yourself. Maybe it was standing at the edge of the ocean, feeling small beneath the vast sky. Maybe it was holding your newborn child for the first time. Maybe it was creating art or listening to music that moved you to tears. Maybe it was helping someone in need and feeling a warmth in your chest. Maybe it was a moment of clarity where everything made sense, where you felt at peace with yourself and the world. Were those moments encounters with God? Or were they simply peak human experiences, the brain releasing certain chemicals, neurons firing in particular patterns? Does it matter? If an experience transforms you, if it makes you more loving, more compassionate, more alive, does it matter what label you put on it? Whether you call it God or the universe or consciousness or simply being, the effect is the same. You've touched something real, something important. You've glimpsed, however briefly, a deeper truth about existence. Maybe that's what God really is. Not a being or an entity, but truth itself, goodness itself, beauty itself, love itself, the Platonic forms made real. When you encounter truth, you encounter God. When you experience love, you experience God. When you create beauty, you participate in God's nature. In this view, God isn't separate from the world, standing apart and looking down. God is woven into the fabric of reality itself. God is what happens when the universe becomes conscious of itself. God is the meaning we find, the connections we make, the transcendence we experience. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe God is exactly what traditional religions say, a personal being who created the universe, who loves us, who wants a relationship with us, who has revealed himself through prophets and scripture and miracles. Maybe all this philosophizing is just human beings trying to complicate something that's actually quite simple. Maybe the truth has been there all along in the holy books, in the teachings of the great spiritual masters, in the traditions passed down through generations. Maybe we just need to have the humility to accept it rather than trying to figure everything out with our limited minds. The honest answer is this: I don't know, and neither does anyone else. Not really. We have beliefs, intuitions, experiences, arguments, and evidence. But we don't have certainty. We're all fumbling in the dark, trying to make sense of a mystery that might be fundamentally unsolvable. And you know what? That's okay. That's human. We're finite beings trying to grasp the infinite. We're temporary creatures contemplating eternity. We're asking questions that might not have answers, or at least not answers we can understand. But we keep asking anyway, because that's what it means to be human. To wonder, to question, to seek, to yearn for something more. Whether that something more is God or enlightenment or truth or meaning or simply understanding, we can't help but reach for it. It's in our nature. And maybe, in the end, the reaching is more important than the grasping. Maybe the journey is more valuable than the destination. Maybe the question matters more than the answer. So who is God? God might be the creator of the universe or the universe itself. God might be a personal being or an impersonal force. God might be love, consciousness, the ground of being, the first cause, the omega point toward which everything evolves. God might be a fiction, a comforting story we tell ourselves to make sense of a senseless world. Or God might be so far beyond any of these concepts that all our words and thoughts fail to capture even a fraction of the reality. What I can tell you is this: however you answer this question, it will shape your life. It will influence how you treat others, how you face suffering, how you find joy, how you deal with death, and how you create meaning. So take the question seriously. Explore different perspectives. Read widely. Think deeply. Meditate or pray. Have conversations with people who believe differently from you. Be willing to change your mind. Be willing to sit with uncertainty. Don't let fear drive your conclusions, whether it's fear of meaninglessness or fear of divine judgment. And remember that everyone else is on this journey too. The person who believes with absolute certainty and the person who doubts everything. They're both trying to make sense of the same mystery. They both want to live meaningful lives. They both want to be happy, to love and be loved, to contribute something to the world. Our different answers to the question of God shouldn't divide us. They should remind us that we're all seekers, all pilgrims, all fellow travelers on this strange and wonderful adventure called life. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Who or what is God to you? Do you believe in a traditional religious conception of God? Do you have a more personal or unconventional understanding? Are you an atheist or an agnostic? Have you had experiences that convinced you one way or another? Has your view changed over time? Drop a comment below and let's have a real conversation about this. I read every comment, and I'd genuinely love to hear your perspective. And here's the thing: there's no wrong answer. Well, maybe there is, somewhere in the cosmos, an ultimate truth we haven't found yet. But down here, in this comment section, in this moment, your honest thoughts are what matter. Your journey is valid. Your questions are important. Your doubts are okay. Your faith is okay. We're all in this together, trying to figure it out. If this video made you think, if it challenged you, if it gave you a new perspective, or just reminded you of how profound and mysterious existence really is, hit that like button. It helps more people find this video and join this conversation. And if you want more deep dives into life's biggest questions, if you want to explore philosophy, consciousness, meaning, and purpose, then subscribe to this channel. Because we're just getting started. There are so many more mysteries to explore, so many more questions to ask, so many more perspectives to consider. Thank you for taking this journey with me today. Thank you for sitting with these big questions, for not looking away from the mystery. Whether you found answers or just more questions, I hope this time was meaningful for you. Remember, the fact that you're wondering about these things, that you're seeking truth and meaning, that's what makes you human. That's what makes you beautiful. Keep searching, keep questioning, keep growing. And who knows, maybe in that very searching, you'll find what you're looking for. Or maybe you'll find something even better, the courage to live fully in the mystery. Until next time, keep thinking, keep wondering, and keep being awesome.